say that we've got something as equally as impressive as that drones for first responders.
It's an infrastructure study. That's awesome.
That's a tough act to follow, I get it. But you have spreadsheets and graphs.
Hey, concrete. I'm looking forward to this.
I remember your comment from last time when you said you had me at infrastructure, and I shared that with these guys, and I can tell you that these guys share the same enthusiasm that you have for that, and we're grateful to have them on board. But before I have them come up, I just want to recognize the assistance that we had with this project from Public Services. We had Parks in to get some information. Budget was extremely helpful. Ashley was partner on this to help develop the presentation and kind of work through the analysis. Helped us move it off of a strictly financial evaluation, and now we can use this as a tool as data comes online to help move from this proactive, predictive to a predictive kind of model so that we could, over time, reduce the overall cost of capital, but then also improve where we need. You'll hear later about some significant needs that we have in water and sewer. You're going to hear about some successes that we've had with our street conditions. And I thought it was ironic that one of the things that was most recognized from that Zen city was the infrastructure, primarily the roads, and the fact that we have that 85 PCI, which is solid. And we, if we just continue to fund that the way that we are now, we'll see that to continue to grow. So that's exactly some of the things that we want to address with a study like this, is to respond to those customers, our residents' needs. Let's see. Again, Nujan was on board to lead this study. I'm happy to have them on. They were able to take their knowledge from the first one and move it forward. We hope that over time we're going to continue to do this exercise, and we'll deepen the analysis with future iterations. And it is extremely data dependent. One of the things that we learned this year is that we have a lot of data out there and trying to get it to reconcile. Some is in summary information, some is in detail. So that's something that we're going to learn over the next few iterations, is how to kind of tie all that together. So with that, I'm going to introduce Chris Eckroot and Richard Campbell. These two, you know Chris from our rate study, and Richard is also a professional with NewGen, and they're going to be able to tag team the rest of the presentation, and then we'll have time afterward for some questions.
Well, thank you so very much, Mayor, Council, Chris Eckroot. Pleasure to be with you again today. That is a hard act to follow. Richard and I were actually talking about, so I think the question was, what else could you do with this? And I'll just put it out there, violation of watering restrictions, you could monitor for that. You could look for broken sprinkler heads, just some things to think about there. So just some, little other applications. But again, here to talk about the update to the infrastructure funding study. This is building off of what we did in 2023. And we're really here to talk today about how we've enhanced the work that started in 2023. And so as I think about that, what this really to me is, it's the story of momentum. The city has done a great job with infrastructure planning, infrastructure funding. You're continuing to build off of that. And that's what you're going to see in this presentation today, is that momentum. Now, I will say this presentation, the work we've done at this point, it's based on what we know today. That will change going forward. As Dave mentioned, updates will be needed. We'll continue to have to look at this. As more things become known, these numbers will shift, these numbers will change. So this is a snapshot in time based on what we know today. All right. If I can figure out how to work, oh, there we go. So just kind of pulling back, goal and objective, what are we trying to achieve with this study? We're really trying to answer the big question, what do we need to fund our assets, both now and into the future? We're looking at a short term, what we're calling ultimately 10 years, as well as the long term, 30 years into the future. What are we funding now? What do we need to fund? What is that gap? And then how do we bridge that gap? When we think about bridging that gap, it's not just about spending more money. That is one strategy, but the other element of this is coming in and being smarter with our dollars. We want to be cost efficient. We want to be cost effective in how we deploy those dollars. The way we do that is we move from reactive maintenance and replacement to proactive, then predictive. That's ultimately where we want to go. Traditionally, most municipalities have been in that reactive bucket. If it breaks, we fix it. We're trying to move off of that and be smarter about how we manage our infrastructure going forward. You see at the bottom the categories we've included, so that's really what we're focusing on here today. So again, going back to that 2023 process, we're using industry standard indices, inflationary techniques, where we're coming in and looking at reproduction cost, replacement cost. What is it going to cost us in the future to replace those assets? That's really what the 2023 study was based on. Here in the current study, we've added to that. What we're looking at now is a number of additional items. So we're coming in and we're looking at the condition indices, both in the capital improvement plan as well as the pavement condition index on the roadway side. We have better GIS data that we're using now. So we've got better data, we have better estimation of the condition, the age and condition of our assets. That is now coming into the analysis to be more predictive, and you're going to see some more of that as we walk through this presentation. As you see on the screen right now, you have a number of replacement plans already in place. This is one of the great strengths of the city. You are planning, you have these plans in place, you're executing on these plans. Anything that's underlined is not in this presentation today. You've already handled that. We're focusing on the items that are not underlined. Again, every year through your budgeting process, you come in, you reevaluate your needs, you balance those competing goals and objectives, and that works across all of these plans. But again, what we're doing here today is giving you kind of that future view, short-term, long-term. What is that future view? What do we need to adequately maintain our infrastructure? So where are we at right now? Big number right there at the bottom, 135 million. That's what we're kind of baselining everything against. And you see how that breaks out between cash funding and bond funding, but we're going to come back to that $135 million number as we go through this presentation. When you look at all those areas that we're looking at here, that's your annual capital replacement funding right now. That's where you stand today. And so ultimately, you're going to see this kind of graphic as we talk about water and wastewater in streets and parks. I want to talk about this graphic down at the bottom here. What does this mean? Ultimately, this shaded area, that's the estimated spending that we need by year. We're fairly confident in the next 10 years. That's where we've got a really good handle on things. As we go out beyond that 10-year time frame, this is where we're looking more at a long-term average and looking at how inflation will impact that replacement cost going forward. So that's your annual spend in that shaded area. You've got three different lines on this graphic. That blue line in the middle, that's where your spending is right now. As you look at the green line down below, that's your short-term average spend. That's the 10-year average spend. As we look at the orange line above, that's the long-term average spend. So that provides our bands, our low point, our high point. You see right now you're in a good spot. You're basically right there in the middle. That's where you want to be. But I do want to note, as we look at 27, 28, 29, you see that shaded area. It starts to kind of increase up there. We've got some big projects that we're going to be talking about today. We're going to be talking about it when it comes to the budget. We're going to be talking about it when it comes to the rates, when we're talking water and wastewater rates. We've got some big projects that we need to spend money on. And that's where you see that shaded area start to increase there above the line. That will impact near-term spend as you look at those near-term needs. Up at the top here in the table, you see what those short-term and long-term averages are broken out in the 5 areas we're looking at today. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Richard so he can come in and talk more about the streets and alleys analysis that we've done.
All right. Spend a little bit of time. We'll focus on the street specifically and where you're at and what you're doing moving forward. Okay, actually, And the conversation on the drones was not about how can y'all use them better, it's how do we need this for a rate study? For the life of us, I don't know how, nor do we know how to do a demonstration in front of City Hall, but we're not throwing that out yet. Now, the whole purpose of this was to figure out how to move y'all forward. I tell you, just the fact that we're having this conversation puts y'all ahead of probably the majority of the municipalities that we work with. It's crazy how little time is spent focusing on this. But the fact that y'all doing it, that your staff focuses on it so much is impressive. So obviously, the starting point, the bare minimum is reactive. Something fails, you go out and fix it. Nobody wants to be there. Y'all do a great job of being in the proactive, of going, you know what, we see this coming. We know this is a possibility. Let's address it now. The goal is to use the information that you have, the information that you're starting to get, and move into the predictive. Okay, we know how, in this instance, roadways, we know how they respond. We know how they're expected to deteriorate. Let's get ahead of that. Let's have a plan. Let's even have a strategy for where we want to do this and where we need to do this to get what we want out of it. So we use GIS mapping, all your streets and alleys. Y'all have a good job of really grading your streets and alleys. And that's what this first part, we use the pavement condition index. And that's just what that is a grade of your individual streets. And apologize, I don't mean to over explain on any of this stuff. I need it kindergarten for me. So that's what I'll do. I just do want to make sure that we're all in the same spot when we're talking about this. So in doing that, in your pavement condition index, you graded all of your streets, your roads. We looked at starters categories. So you got a few different categories. You got municipal roads in your system. That's just your subdivisions, around your houses, that type of traffic. Because that's the difference, is really the traffic and how much activity you have on your roads. Another one you don't have here is we have collectors. Collectors are going to be what's moving you around your city. And then the arterials and highways, which self-explanatory on that one. Of those, they all degrade differently. We use the degradation curves on this. They're made up of different materials. You have concrete and you have asphalt. All those respond differently. They require different treatments, and they also degrade differently over time. So we're taking all that into account and really developing a plan for what do we do, how do we stay ahead of that, how do we work with that pavement condition index and where we want it to be, and how do we move that? How do we just change the bubble a little bit? Talked about the pavement condition index, PCI range. So all the way to the left-hand side there, that was the key indicator. That's what we really worked off of. That's what we targeted when we were doing things. So here we just have really your PCI scores, your ranges for both alleys. You see streets and alleys. Good news is you see the different color codings. Green, that works nicely because you're 71 to 100 PCI score range, you've got over 92% of your system on your streets that are in satisfactory, good condition or in green. And in alleys, you're the same thing. You're over 60% on that. That is good. Then we look at the 0 to 40, the red, the serious fail, the very poor down here. When you get to that spot, we're talking about reconstruction. That's just the fix for that. Yes, ma'am.
Ask a quick question.
Sure.
When we were looking at this, are we looking at, does this include TxDOT roads or not? Are there thoroughfares that are TxDOT roads?
This is not TxDOT. This is what you're responsible for in your city.
Okay, so all state roads are taken out of this. Okay.
That's a good question. Thank you. This just addresses what you're responsible for maintaining on that. So the majority of your system from a street standpoint is in great shape. Alleys, a little bit different. Y'all are getting to where you've got a little bit, when you move into the fair to poor, more of your alleys. When we look at alleys, again, we look at these as really how they're used, what's the wear and tear on them. Alleys are going to be more for we find your rear entry, housing, that type of stuff. Most of the really wear on this is garbage trucks, those types of things. That's a lot of the traffic other than just automobiles going back and forth. So Again, this is to give you an idea. This is some of the data that we loaded into the system to help tell us where we are. And then how we use that data is each one of those components. You see we have asphalt and we have concrete. That's what your roads are made up of. Your alleys are made up of both concrete and asphalt. The reason we have to split those is because there's different treatments for that. And if you notice, it's really nice, the color coding here corresponded to what your PCI scores are. So what that does is those scores drive a certain treatment as you go along. And really what we're looking for here is you see the PCI lift, because a certain treatment gives you a little bump in your PCI score. So that's what we're looking for is, one, where's the road? What's the treatment required because of that? And what do we get out of that? And that lets us maintain certain levels. And that's what we're looking. So you have a PCI score that you're shooting for. In this case, it's 85 actually. What do we have to do to maintain, to get ones that aren't there up and to maintain those that are there? So that's what drives it. That's what we modeled in this whole process. And then this really just shows what you can do and how we measure this and how we modeled this. In reality, you can keep your streets going indefinitely. You never have to replace a street. However, there's a cost associated with that. And that's what we measure here when we're going through. The blue line, that's just a full reconstruction. You go into a street, you can gain another 55, 60 years on your streets by just replacing the road. However, this represents your maintenance. The things we just looked at here, the different treatments. So when you have a road that's needing something, you can do your spin there. Obviously, that's cheaper than what a reconstruction is, and you gain in your PCI score. You spin, you gain in this PCI score. But what we're looking at here is eventually, from an economic standpoint, it comes more expensive to keep spending that money than replacing it. Kind of like your car. You got your car, you start out brand new, it needs things, it needs oil change, it needs tires. Pretty soon you have to do something to the transmission, then the engine. You can keep it going indefinitely, but there's a cost to it, and eventually it costs more maintaining it than it does just replacing it. Same concept right here. And so that's what we'll find, and that's what the model will show from an economic standpoint, is that eventually it costs more to maintain that road than it does just to replace it. You start to lose things on the road. Really, a big part of it is your base. So you have cracks in it. You can repair the cracks, bumps. You can do things for that. But when you start losing your base, that's when it starts getting expensive. And that drives a lot of the conditions. Just saw this from Chris earlier for your total spend, but this looks a little bit familiar then. So you can see where your current funding, as I mentioned earlier, you have an 85 PCI target. That's what you maintain. That's an extremely good condition index for your system. You do a great job with what you do. What y'all do, what your staff is doing to maintain it, that is a high target. Your current funding on that is a little over $45 million. Your 10-year keep up, because you have a portion of it broken into, okay, part of it is you already have your roads and your alleys that are above the 85. So then you got to keep spending to keep them there. You don't want to let them degrade, while you are focusing on those that we saw earlier that are in that low range, that are in that replace range, that were in the red. So your 10-year keep up average is about 42.5. But as we go along on your keep up and catch up, it's going to increase. You're getting about 53 million on that. And that's because as we move out, roads do continue to deteriorate. So your spend is going to go up over time. And then this 52 million is an average as well, because you're going to have spikes in it. You're going to have spots where you do have to replace roads. You're going to spend more at that time in that year. You're going to have lower spend in other years. But from an average standpoint, this is about what you would be looking at to both keep your roadways and to maintain.
I have a question. What cost escalation for maintenance and replacement are you assuming over time?
We're just using both off of prior ENR, the engineering the increases from historical, and then also just a regular inflationary on that, just on
Okay.
your spends.
Because I know in the last, since COVID, the inflation costs have been kind of way out of control. And so is there, how are you accounting for that? Because obviously, well, hopefully, what we've seen over the last 5 years is not going to continue the way that it is. But
Right.
what's it going to go back to? And is there going to be a correction in it? And all of those things are all just unknown. So I was just curious what you were using for the escalation.
We more average out to where the last 4 or 5 years are not as impactful because that isn't the norm. And we don't expect it to be. So we are lowering our inflation numbers moving forward. I mean, life used to be simple. We'd look back 2 or 3 years and figure out what's going on, but we couldn't in this case. So we don't throw those out for the last 4 or 5 years, but we water them down a whole lot because we realize that's not the normal. We don't expect that to be the average moving forward. Whether it self-corrects eventually, we don't know, but we certainly expect it to become closer to what we would expect to be an average normal operating year for that. So we did not do increases from what you've seen the last 4 or 5 years, but they are a little higher than what we saw 10 years ago.
Okay.
So, but that is a good point. We did not operate on that. The same as when we're doing things for like your rate study or something like that. We same thing. We have to water the past few years down because there's nothing normal about that.
I did want to just touch base just for a little bit on this. When you look at, can you go back to the last slide?
sure can, yes.
Sorry.
Yes, ma'am.
And I know we'll talk about it on the next page as well. But here you see that when you talk about the keep up and the versus the catch up is assuming that every single road would be at an 85 or higher. So, which would really make our average much higher than 85. So there is a balance as to like, and really council, if you want to have all of your money go towards just roads being, 85 and above, that would be what would be required. But the thing, especially in the short term, you can see that we are funding more than just the 85 PCI to maintain that, right? I'm not suggesting we roll back money from that at all. I think you can see there's a need to continue to invest. And I do know that the money we're putting in every year will actually be chipping away and getting us higher than 85 PCI. But what I do think is important to know is that where we're putting money very well towards streets, there's other things that may benefit in the short term during the budget is reallocating some of this funding. I know that several of you have made complaints to me about our street signs not being maintained well. There is a need to potentially hire a third party, shift some of that funding for a year or two to fix that. There's also, although we have talked and you guys have given us money in the past about traffic devices and the technology for having, syncing of lights, there is also a benefit with the new technology that's coming on is having a full assessment done of all of our traffic signals and making sure we have a, holistic big project that comes in using the state-of-the-art technology so that we can actually monitor things better and make instant changes remotely. So this gives us great flexibility in the short term to be able to shift funding to things that might be more necessary in the short run and be able to make an instant impact. But I did want to make sure that council was aware that may be what we're planning to do coming budget, depending on what's available.
Well, and I will say, because I think I've been, certainly the one that's been the most vocal about wanting to understand where we are with all of this. Having this data is what makes me feel more comfortable making decisions. My biggest fear is looking out on the horizon and seeing our needs going up and are just falling further and further behind every year and just getting to a point where we can't catch up. So having this data it gives me more peace of mind knowing that we do have a handle on what we have and what our needs are going forward and what we really need to be spending. And if we have years where we need to reallocate some of those funds here or there, this gives me what I need to feel more comfortable with that decision. So I really appreciate the work that's gone into this.
Okay, next slide. And that's really what I was getting to at this slide, or what we were getting to at this slide. Did you want to add anything else to this slide that we were talking about?
Well, the one big difference on here, and to your point on the spending too, what allows you to do some things, PCI score is a policy decision. It's what you want it. But where you have some options here, yeah, we talk about what if you raise your target. Obviously, public satisfaction, little intangible on that, but higher short-term spend, lower long-term. But the same thing, just the opposite if you lower it. However, mentioned you also have concrete and asphalt. So there are different treatments there. Your scores respond differently. So you can have a little lower concrete PCI target than you do in asphalt, because when you have asphalt streets, they respond to that short-term maintenance. You can do small things and you get a corresponding change in your PCI score. Concrete, not the same thing. The concrete doesn't really respond as well to your little short-term, the micro crack stuff. You can fix things. Concrete responds better to more of your bigger spend items. So you're gonna see more movement from a PCI standpoint, but you can operate with a lower PCI score on concrete and get the same response from it, really. So that gives you just a chance to move some things around. Overall, 85%, extremely strong on that. And this is gonna improve as you catch up on some of your roads, as you continue to spend money. You're gonna see efficiencies there on the way you spend, on the way you do your maintenance. And then I think Aaron's gonna come up in a little bit. Same thing on the rest of the system that we looked at. As AI improves, as the data collection improves, this is just gonna improve and allow us to pinpoint more on where you spend your money. And that, I think we'll move into water, wastewater now. Back to Chris.
We'll start with this fun picture. So one of the things we've done on water and wastewater this year is we've incorporated Iowa survivor curves. And the way to understand Iowa survivor curves is, let's go back to the insurance industry and the life insurance industry in particular. You think about when you go out for life insurance, they're going to ask for age, they're going to ask for your health, and they're going to use mortality tables to come in and see, okay, how long are you going to last? And ultimately, what should that premium be so that this money's out for them? We're effectively doing the same thing here with an Iowa survivor curve. This is a statistical tool that we can use to go in and estimate probability of asset failure. As the asset ages, based on what the material is, we can use all of these data points to come in and begin to get more predictive about when we anticipate that asset will fail. And so based on that, we can then come in and better program in our capital spend. So this has been incorporated this year into our analysis. As we move, continuing from reactive to proactive predictive, in addition to the survivor curves, again, you've got better GIS mapping data that we're using. We are using your 10-year capital plan right now. That's our short term that we're using. Beyond that, that's when we're getting into more of that statistical analysis and looking at what you have, estimating that replacement cost. But coming in, what are we spending right now? So this is the total annual spend, water and wastewater combined, $85 million. That's the annual spend, water, wastewater at the moment. And you see the breakout right now between cash and debt. Obviously, we want to target, we've talked about this before, we want to target a solid capital structure. We don't want to be spending debt on everything, but we do have to balance our funding sources every year based on the needs. That's where the annual rate study becomes so important. Coming back in every year, looking at our needs, looking at how best to fund those needs, but in doing so, we want to practice rate gradualism. We've talked about this before, smaller annual incremental rate increases, allowing our ratepayers, allowing our residents to better accommodate those cost increases in their monthly budgets. But we want to make sure we're also financially sustainable at the same time. Now, Dave, I think you had a comment on the rate study, correct?
Yeah, just a couple comments. We do actually also have a water and sewer rate study and a stormwater study that NewGen is working for us. We're going to have the results presented to council at the August budget workshop, and I just want to put some thoughts out there about what we might expect when that happens. Operating costs continue to see pressure. That's going to put pressure on the rate, projected rate increases. We have this expanded capital program, which we'll talk a little bit about further here. We want to allow for additional cash where we're able to relieve some of the pressure from having to get bonds, but because of the support for the capital is primarily from the bonds, and because of those projects that Chris had mentioned are significant, we can't cover with cash. So that's going to put some upward pressure on those rates. And while we don't have all that information now, but the 5-year plan calls for rate increases between 6.4 and 11.8%. Could easily be conceived that we would be looking at projected rate increases in double digits over that 5-year period based on the anticipated bonding requirements that we need. Now, how do we manage that better? We want to smooth those rate impacts. We want to prevent spikes. We want to align the repayment of those bonds with the expected life of the asset. So what does that mean? That means taking a look at that 16-year period that we use to pay back those bonds, and do we consider a 20-year period or a 25-year period? Chris will tell you that the 16 years is probably the exception rather than the rule, especially when you're talking about water and sewer assets, because the life expectancy could be 50 or 60 years. So we're not matching that payment for that asset with the life of the asset, so that intergenerational equity is not there. So by considering that, it might align a little bit better with the asset, and then it would also allow us to smooth out those impacts. So long term, and just keeping the customer in mind when we look for those rate increases or project those rate increases. Again, we'll have the results in August with the budget workshop, and we actually are going to touch on this a little bit later in the economic outlook presentation.
Well, that's a really good look forward for ultimately what's going to be coming in August. And again, even as we look at the larger national trends, we are still seeing nationally about an average 6% every year in terms of cost increases. Water, sewer, trash index that's published by the Fed, it continues to outpace CPI and median household income. And that's not a unique thing to you. It's not a unique thing to Texas. It's a national trend that we are continuing to see. And so we'll continue to have that conversation when we're back here in August.
I have a quick question.
Yes, ma'am.
So this 85 million, the total annual capital program, that's not a long-term annual capital. That's just because we've got a lot of stuff, big spend stuff going on right now, right?
Correct.
So that's driving that number to that 85, right? Like over the long term, if we are looking, 5-10 years out, it's not going to stay at 85 million.
Well, that's going to play right into
Right?
this slide. So
Okay.
we'll keep going here, and hopefully I'll be able to answer your question as we go through. Because what you're going to see here is you're going to start to see those spikes. And what those spikes are associated with are some significant capital projects. You've got the combined pump station, Clearwell water treatment expansion, and this is just water. We're seeing some of this on the wastewater side as well. So we've got these spikes that are happening up. We are anticipating a reduction there in the middle, but you see long term, we just get right back to that point. So again, I don't know if that answers your question totally or not, but yes, your short-term spend right now is high, but I don't necessarily see that just coming down. You're still going to have that spend as you look into the future, maintaining these assets and continuing to maintain your infrastructure and maintain your continuous and adequate service level.
Kristen, I just might want to point out too that in the past probably 5 years, that's averaged about 30 million. So when you're seeing that 85 now, that is really high for us.
Yes.
We've never been that high. So even using 85 for the next 10 years, that's accounting for the wastewater plant. Some of those big projects we're doing, 40 million for just a project in these. So that 85 is already higher than what you've normally seen.
Right.
Going forward.
And we've known these
Yes.
very large projects were coming.
Correct.
But, even when we're looking at, out further on this chart, really you're getting into the whole gradual. If we can just kind of maintain it more gradually over time, then we can, try to avoid these spikes.
We
right?
reduce the slope of the line. Exactly. That's what we do. We reduce the slope. We level it out. That's the goal. That's the goal. But you are always going to have, especially when you're thinking infrastructure, water, wastewater, you're going to have some significant projects. So you're going to continue to see slugs. We call it that we say capital investment is lumpy, is the way we call it in the industry, because that's what this is. It's lumpy, but because you have these big projects that are big dollar projects that have to be done over a 1, 2, 3 kind of year time frame. So, okay. But on the water side, current funding 42.5, the 10-year average based on your CIP 43 million, that long-term 45. So basically, we're right in line with where we need to be. But again, looking longer term, anticipating we may need some more funding here long term on the water side. On the wastewater side, again, you see that capital investment, those projects. We've got the wastewater treatment plant, the gravity sewer as well. That's where you see the spikes there. Wastewater right now, what we know today, based on everything that's in the plan today, wastewater's in pretty good shape. But again, you balance between water and wastewater every year as you go through your budget process, as you make those spending choices, as you make the budgetary and the rate choices, we balance between water and wastewater as necessary, and you balance between those funding sources as well. Again, larger goal and objective, rate gradualism, we want to mitigate rate shock where we can. Our other two areas that we looked at this year, this is just machinery and equipment. So we did machinery and equipment in parks. And I'll say that this analysis is still, there's more refinement needed, both in this area and on parks. So we have to be careful what conclusions we draw from this. As we get better data, as we spend more time in the data, get more predictive with the data, we'll be able to get a better view of machinery and equipment and parks as well. But right now, machinery and equipment looks pretty good. This does include your $900,000, I believe it's an annual spend on your radio system. That's included here. But again, in good shape on machinery and equipment right now. We're above that top line. But this picture will get refined going forward. Same thing on parks. Now, parks, again, this is an initial snapshot. I do not want you to look at this and say, we are overspending on parks. That is not the message we're spending here. This picture is incomplete at this time. You have I believe it's the Nature Center coming online. You've got Vista Ridge Park coming online. That's not in here. So you've got spending that's going on. You've got additional facilities that are not in here that need to be brought in. So again, we're going to be refining this picture going forward.
Does this not include facilities at all?
So it's very limited on the facilities that were included because of the data sources that we had. So it is an incomplete picture.
Okay.
Okay.
I was just, for anybody who may be looking at
Yes.
this graphic, it says does not include facilities, but there
Correct.
are some facilities included.
I'd have to go back and get
In
the
this.
specific ones, but it was very, very limited.
Okay.
So.
This and the machinery and equipment analysis was probably closer to what we did in 2023, where we just pulled the asset information out of our financial system, and then we defined when it needed to be replaced, assigned a cost to that, and that's what this is modeling. Since that time, we've provided some additional funds towards parks related to Thrive maintenance and some other things, so that's why the funding appears a little bit elevated. But once we start adding some more detail regarding facilities, specifically in the parks or some of the other new ones that we're going to add, you're going to see that spend, that average go up, and probably a need for additional funding directed to these areas.
Yeah, I just don't think that this data set is complete enough to be able to actually come in and draw conclusions. Wanted you to know we're looking at it, we're refining it, and we'll come back with a better picture. Okay? So as we kind of wrap up, again, what is our purpose? What are we trying to do with this? As I said early on, the goal is not just to spend more money. We recognize that we will have greater infrastructure needs long term. We will need to spend more, but we don't bridge the gap just by spending more money. We also bridge the gap by being more efficient with the dollars that we're spending. We want to get to that predictive point so that we can sustain our assets longer and replace them when it makes sense to, when it's cost efficient and effective to. So this is what we've talked about before. We've been reactive, we're moving, we're getting to proactive, and now you see the predictive side of this. And I think Aaron will come up here in just a second and talk about the use of AI for the water and wastewater infrastructure and how that's really pushing us towards that predictive side of things. But I want to stop on this graphic for just a minute. As you think about our long-term strategy, again, it starts with defining the service level. What is the service level we want to provide to the community? We are having more and more discussions with communities in the area, with our clients, about this first bubble, defining service level. It is my opinion that the legislature is not done with us yet. I still anticipate they are going to continue to challenge our ability to fund our operations. We're going to see something come out of this next legislative session. I don't know what it's going to look like. But what that's going to drive us to is this question about how we define service level. Because ultimately, we may not be in a position that we can fund the service level we want to, or it's going to drive into community discussions about what is that service level and what funding is required for that. So that's why I wanted to stop here and talk about this, because as we talk to the community, as we talk to our citizens, we need to be talking not just about dollars, but we need to be talking about service level and what that means, because that's ultimately what drives this entire process. So again, just summing this up, we are in a much better place than we were in 2023. We've got better data sources. We're being more predictive. We will continue to look at this. We will continue to refine this picture. But again, it is not just about spending more money. It's about being smarter in how we spend money, how we maintain our infrastructure. So again, appreciate your time today. Happy to answer any questions that you may have for us.
Aaron, did you want to make a few comments about Voda AI and some of the other tools that might be useful or that will be useful in this analysis in the future?
So Voda AI is an AI technology. It's right there in the name. So that just to remind you, what they do is we feed them a lot of data, and it includes age of the pipe. It's really focused on the distribution system and the collection system. So we give them everything that we have. So when the pipe was installed, the pipe material, they use things like for water lines that I wouldn't have thought of, but is significant in their algorithm, which is the slope of the water line. So that what they use is they use topographic surveys, and they estimate what the slope on those water lines are. And what they can do is predict failures, particularly with water lines, which is where their initial focus was, so that we can better prioritize how we spend these dollars. The main thing that when we entered into that conversation with them is what they told us is the big advantage is you don't want to spend precious dollars on pipes that don't need to be replaced yet, and they help us really zero in on those pipes that need to be replaced immediately, and then improve the timing on how we implement these dollars. I will say there's key pieces of information that they won't know on the sewer lines. So sewer has a lot of variation to it on how the pipe ages. And the big piece to that is the sewer gas inside the pipe. So what really deteriorates a sewer line is when it has volatile, a situation like high velocity in the flow. It makes the gases release. Those gases are H2S typically, which is very harmful to pipe, particularly concrete pipe, clay pipe. It just eats it. So one of the failures that you typically see is the top of the pipe that doesn't have any flow on it will be gone. So those are the kinds of things that they're going to have a hard time predicting, because they don't know that part of it. I anticipate it's going to be a lot better prediction on water than it is sewer. So, but we'll see what we get. We expect a report from them in about 2 or 3 weeks. So, we tried to push them really hard to get it ready for this meeting, but we just couldn't get there. But I think it's going to help us really prioritize the capital dollars and spend the money when we need to instead of getting ahead of when we need to.
So I just want to make sure I understood the message. So the central theme, I think, after 25 slides is that Parks is overfunded. Is that?
That's what I heard.
That's what I heard. Okay. Just nice.
Patrick, you're so in tune.
We actually had to make a phone call to Stacy when we first saw the slide to make sure we did damage control.
Any other questions or comments on this? I want to thank staff and thank you guys for doing the analytics. This is not easy work. It takes a lot of time. There are a lot of assumptions that have to be vetted, and I'm proud that the city takes the long-term view. I think this is the core of what it takes to be responsible stewards of our tax dollars, and not just sit here at a meeting and go, somebody screamed about a road, we got to go fix it today. We actually can plan when we do it this way, so I appreciate it. I look forward to seeing this methodology pushed out into other parts of the city as we continue to move forward. I'm not necessarily happy about the perpetual growth that we have to deal with, but I'm also, there's no other alternative, and it gives us great data when the state comes to us and says, oh, that 3.5% cap that we claim to be under all the time, which we never are because we get to play shenanigans. It allows us to really come back and have a real conversation as opposed to just something that sells on a campaign form. So thank you for that. I don't think we have anything else before lunch. Claire and I had a knockdown drag out. She wanted a working lunch. I wanted a lunch break. That may not be true, but we are going to take, let's take about 25, 30 minutes for lunch. Well, 25 or 30. We'll see. If I give it 30, you're going to take 35. We are on our lunch break.